Good evening. I'm Javita Hill. I am the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Commission for Women and the Office of Engagement for Women. Thank you for joining us on this 10th installment of our virtual series, Your Voice, Your Vote, Your Power, Making Democracy Work. The Philadelphia Commission for Women was established by a unanimous ballot referendum in 2015, sponsored by former Councilmember Blondell Reynolds Brown. We are charged with promoting policy recommendations to the mayor, to city council, and the citizens and the city's decision makers on issues of gender equity and social justice. Our series, Your Voice, Your Power, Your Vote, Making Democracy Work, was inspired by the difference that women in general and Black women in particular made in the 2020 elections that delivered the nation's first Black and Asian American woman vice president and turned around historic Senate races in Georgia. We also saw our democracy under siege last year on January 6th, when violence erupted in an attempt to overturn a fair and free election. We know that elections have consequences as we see the erosion of abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, and voting rights in states across the nation. We are eyewitnesses to the fragility of democracy as we watch in horror of what is going on in Ukraine. And with this in mind, throughout the rest of the year, much of our programming will be dedicated to encouraging voter participation. Again, elections do have consequences. If you have questions for our moderator or our panelists, please put those questions in the chat, and if time permits, we will present them. And now I would like to introduce you to our moderator. We are very privileged and honored to have City Council Member Maria Quinones Sanchez. Councilmember Quinones Sanchez has served Council's 7th District since 2008, covering the neighborhoods of Castor Gardens, Fairhill, Feltonville, Frankfurt, Harrogate, Hunting Park, Juniata, Kensington, Oxford Circle, and Wissinoming. She made history by becoming the first Latina to be elected to Philadelphia City Council. In 2001, she co-founded the Pennsylvania statewide Latino Coalition. That same year, she was named the regional director of the Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Administration. Under her watch, the administration launched a 12-city voter registration program that registered more than 32,000 new voters and increased Latina voter turnout by more than 35% in specific areas. As regional director, she led successful efforts to create bilingual ballots in several cities throughout Pennsylvania. She is a dedicated advocate for working families. Some of her legislative initiatives have been affordable housing, the establishment of the Philadelphia Land Bank, police reform, and the establishment of a domestic workers' Bill of Rights that ensures fair wages and benefits for domestic workers. Thank you, Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. The floor is yours.
Thank you so very much to our Executive Director and Fearless Leader, Javita Hill, for all your work. And thank you so much for putting this session together, particularly focused on Latinos and Latina women and our role in advocacy, politics, and everything that has to do with our families and promoting our community. So thank you so very much. Later, you'll hear from our wonderful chairperson, Vanessa Fields. But I want to start with our panelists. I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have this afternoon, starting with Joanno Derocruz. Joanna Otero-Cruz is now the Executive Director and President of the Women Against Abuse, which is the latest achievement in her career on social justice career path. We all know her and had a pleasure working with her for many years as she served as the Deputy Managing Director of the City of Philadelphia, where she oversaw 8 city departments and about $23 million in the budget. She was formerly the Executive Director of Concilio, the Council of Spanish-Speaking Organizations, and directed the Behavioral and Family Health Services for Congreso de Latinos Unidos. That is where I met her. She is the founder of the first Latina domestic violence program. That's how I met Joanna many years ago. Vanessa Carraccosa is Director of Partnerships at Philly Counts in the city of Philadelphia, where she manages a budget of $4.5 million and leads a team of 70 staff members who support neighborhood canvassing programs that include Philly Counts, COVID-19 Prevention and Response Network, and a CDC-funded community health workers program. She is a Mexican-American Latina and the first-generation college graduate who is driven by inclusive community development and mission-driven work that empowers underrepresented communities to influence government and obviously today's society. Valentina Rosario de Jesus is the program manager at Galaei. Galaei is the queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color racial social justice organization. She has been the social justice advocate in the community since the age of 14 and is spearheading Galei's youth programs. She helps youth transition, as she has done herself, into their authentic selves and helps them feel comfortable in their bodies and at their schools, their workplaces, and in their community. Along with being the program manager for Galei's trans, intersex, non-binary, and gender non-conforming services, forging a path for the next generation of trans leaders. She is also a member of the Philadelphia Commission for Women. So ladies, we're Latina, so we're gonna talk fast. We're gonna get through these questions and have some fun here, okay? Thank you again so very much for the Philadelphia Women's Commission. As Jovita mentioned, and I'll be remiss not to shout out my former colleague, Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown, who often talked about the power of women who did it in high heels, walking backwards, in a tightrope. She had her whole spiel. I'm sure I'm not doing justice to it, but nevertheless. So let's get started this evening and really want to, as you introduce yourselves to our audience and folks participating, really want to get from your experience, what are the issues that motivate Latino voters, but that motivate you, particularly in these off-election years. But before you start that, as you introduce yourself, please tell me a fun fact. When did you register? Are you an active voter? When have you not been an active voter, and why not? Like, it's sort of like, how do we motivate others? But what is our own lived experience in today's democracy? And so I don't want to pick a particular order, but Joanna, you're the first one on my screen as we go. So in our new COVID world.
Sure. So thank you so much, Concejal Maria Quinones Sanchez, for having me this evening, and Jovita. I think, my experience has been always, really from my mom. She was an immigrant here. So knowing her battle, knowing her struggle, how difficult it was for her to have the privilege, right, to have a voice, and not having that for so long, I felt like an obligation to be that voice on her behalf. And so many family members who did not have the privilege to vote here or be part of that civic, engagement world. And so from a very young age, I've learned to really appreciate that because I saw so many around me not having the privilege that I've had being born and raised here. So for me, that's always been a thrive for me to be that voice for others.
Go mom, I'm all for mom. Valentina, you're the next one on my screen. So fun fact, when did you register? How do you participate? Do you consider yourself an active voter, and how do we motivate others?
So, wow. I registered to vote as soon as I turned 18. Like I said, I've been a part of Galaei, which has been, instrumental in the Latino community here in Philadelphia. So they've always educated me and told me it's very important to go and vote. I am an active voter. And the way I kind of motivate people is just reminding them that our votes do matter. And if we want to stop gentrification, if we want to hold on to our community, we need to get out and vote. We need to stand in solidarity with each other.
Awesome. So Vanessa, I know you've been out with the Philly Counts crew, probably everywhere and anywhere they would allow you to come in, right? Rains, shine, or others. Speak to us, you know, as an immigrant, you first generation college graduate, how do you feel about voting? When's the first time you registered? Talk to us.
Yeah, thank you. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you all. For me, I also got registered at 18, but I didn't become an active voter until I was 22. I was approached by a community organizer in South Texas, border to Mexico, just telling me, you know, why she was, you know, volunteering at a local campaign and why it was so important for me to vote in the upcoming election. And from there, I feel like she really motivated me to not only become a voter, but also to get involved in my community. So I myself started registering people to vote in Texas. And in Texas, it's like a really long process for you to get what it's called deputized, for you to get like approved to be able to register someone. So I registered, you know, hundreds of voters in Texas, and I was able to just like talk to my friends and family. And since then, I think I've been, you know, really motivated to just share my story with people and, you know, tell them why their vote counts and their vote matters. And, you know, regardless of party, regardless of anything, you know, we all have a say, whether we're voting for a candidate or we're voting for an issue. At the end of the day, it will affect us, it will affect our families, and it will affect our friends.
Thank you so very much for that. You know, obviously our community, you know, in the city of Philadelphia, 65% Puerto Rican, but it has been growing in its diversity, which means that how we message to communities matters, right? Words matter, how we talk to communities, how we understand their perspective is truly important. So Joanna, you know, you've been at this for a little bit like me. So, you know, who are those trusted messengers that we need to motivate to help us with this work, which is every this electionary 6 months? How do we motivate and who are those trusted messengers, and who were the trusted messengers for you around the importance of participating?
Yeah, you know, like a lot of things for us in our community, it happens to me around the kitchen. So those, you know, those individuals who are preparing those church meals.
Is that with a glass of wine and tapas?
All of the above.
Okay, we're sitting around the kitchen. That's where we get this work done. Okay.
Iglesia o en la barra, donde quiera.
Oh, okay.
That's the reality. I think that, you know, it's a lot of, you know, the boots on the ground, the trusted neighbors. They are kind of, you know, when I was growing up, it was everybody's business, right? You know, to make sure that we were all, you know, walking that fine line. Are we behaving? Are we not? It really was, you know, around, it takes a village. And so, you know, parents weren't, you know, it was just a different time. And I think that, you know, going back to some of those roots where we talk about just generating conversation, right? You know, a lot of people in the community, if you complain about, for example, trash, well, you know, that can spark a conversation about engagement and how do we get the young ones involved. And, you know, we're constantly influencing, you know, individuals by our conversations. And the reason I say food is because it's part of our cultura, it's part of, you know, how we do things. If we do a Black party, you know, there's food involved, there's music involved, if, you know, so it's either a formal or informal party or gathering, but oftentimes it's food, and there's opportunities there to engage and really teach. And when I think back, that's how I learned, whether, you know, a lot of times around, you know, when we talked about real like heavy topics, it wasn't around like, let's sit down and talk about, you know, civic engagement at this time. It was just natural conversation about, you know, esas luces en la cuadra no están funcionando. We have to do something about that, right? They're not working, and how do we do that? And it was really a conversation about how do we engage and get involved, whether, you know, you're a community Black captain or, you know, giving out those lunches in the summertime, but really it started there at the roots. And so I think that for me, every interaction that I've had to communicate with whether again, it's, you know, through my work or whether my personal life, I really try to incorporate around conversations beyond what the problem that they're talking about. It's like, okay, well, what can you do about that? How do you get engaged? You know, and for my kids, they're, you know, how we do quinceañeras in the Latino community, that's a big thing. You plan like a year and a half in advance, you know?
Mhm.
So guess what we did for the 18th birthday? Like it was a big thing. Like I got the application. I did it old school. We didn't do it electronic because I wanted the paperwork. I wanted them to experience it and for us to have a dialogue, you know, and it was a really big thing. But I think we have to start incorporating that as part of the normal conversation, as part of nuestra cultura, because remember, a lot of our community, when especially as they migrate or immigrate here, their experiences in their native countries, you know, could definitely influence and impact, you know, how they engage here. And so teaching or talking about the cultural experiences being different here, or even individuals that have voted here before and maybe had a bad experience, you know, prior, they carry that. So I'm not going there again. Yo no voy para allá. Eso fue un revolú la última vez. You know, like we have.
I know that all too well. I'm sorry that I've created a lot of chaos on election days. I can totally, I feel like you're talking to me, okay, here.
True story. One of my first experiences in volunteering for Committee of 70. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I never experienced something like that. I was mortified. If it was based on just that experience, I would have probably never gone back. But I said, okay, I can take this either two ways, right? It was scary. I don't know that I want to be in that situation again. Or we got to repair this. We got to make this better. I chose that route.
I appreciate that. Yes. So yes, we have some chaos sometimes in our community, which leads a little bit to our apathy. And I think we have to own that. I think it's important for the constituencies and our allies who want to know how do they help Latinos get engaged. You know, we've been subjected to a lot of voter fraud and a lot of challenges, and that's the reality of our community. And that's why the work is so hard. But, you know, Valentina, you represent like this, you know, the new, you're going to save us. You know, I'm a mother of a millennial and a Gen Z who often tells me how little we've done and what kind of earth I'm turning over to him. So Valentina, what motivated you to get registered? I know you talked a little bit about Galaei, but you know, Joanna talked a little bit about your home experience. So tell me what the conversation is around your kitchen table, around issues, and how do you motivate folks? How do you get people's anger and motivate them to action?
So first, I'm a Zennial, so I'm between Generation Z and Millennial.
Can you guys stop creating new titles? I'm done. I am done.
Generation Z don't want me and millennials don't want me. I'm like a 97 baby. So like,
what is this new term? So
a Zennial, just
a Zennial. Okay. Yes. Okay.
So the conversations, that we have around the table is very similar to like Joanna, right? It's we need to fix something, right? And then we're trying to figure it out. The same way Joanna said, we look for whether it's ourselves, right? Or if it's reaching out to somebody. That's kind of how the conversations go. But speaking about my experience is speaking on my privilege, because I was privileged enough to have places like Galaei. I was privileged enough to have a mother who understands how important voting is, right? And I think those conversations that we have are amazing, and we need to extend them outwards to our neighbors, right? To our neighbors, to people in the area, right? Conversations are amazing, and they say a lot about who we are when we have conversations, and then the actions that we take after the conversations that we have, like Joanna said, what she does with her children, right? The actions that we take after the conversations, I think are the things that we need to focus on the most, right? Because I could tell you I'm gonna cook you a meal, right? That doesn't mean I'm going to cook you a meal. When I bring the meal to you, then there's actions to a word. So the actions that, because the actions that I take specifically with other queer Latino people, I work closely with the ACLU, like in my job and then on my own time. The actions that we take are like knocking on people's doors, letting people know everywhere we go, like, hey, it's like look into voting. Make sure you're registered to vote. Making sure, you know, the people we love closest to us are registered to vote. The people who we don't know are registered to vote. Making sure Fulana and Fulano are registered to vote, right?
We all know about Fulana and Fulano on our block. That when you see the list. So Vanessa has the experience of having seen, we have really bad street lists, right? So poor Vanessa, when she was doing some of the work as it related to Philly counts, right? Who has a good list? I think that is the $1 million question. So Vanessa, speak to us a little bit. Again, you're, I don't know, are you a millennial, Gen Z? Here we go with all these titles. Where do you fall in that? And again, how, you know, Joanna talked about the kitchen table is hugely important. I believe in that. Our kitchen table, particularly when we're making morcillas, we talk about everybody in the family and we talk about everything. What do you guys talk about? And how do you motivate some of the frustration to action in your family?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I also just learned that word. So don't feel bad for teaching us that word, Valentina. I actually was not aware of it. And I'm a millennial. So I think for me, you know, I think that, you know, I've lived in Texas. I've lived in a couple of cities, you know, growing up. As I mentioned earlier, you know, my parents are from Mexico. They're immigrants from Mexico. They were able to vote for the first time in 2016. So, you know, my dad came undocumented to this country. So I always, you know, remember that in part of like my story of how I got here and how, you know, I'm grateful to have the opportunities that I do have, you know, from access to, you know, going to get a higher education, to now being able, you know, to give back in the way that I do, you know, working in government. And I think a lot is around, you know, just listening to people's different experiences. I have a lot of, you know, family who is still like undocumented. They live in other states, etc. So it's around, you know, thinking about, you know, what candidates are out there, and what do they represent? What are they going to vote for or against? Or, you know, what issues are on the line, and just really getting into that conversation about the why. And then, you know, we can talk logistics about how we're going to make sure that you're registered and how we're going to make sure that, you know, you're able to vote and that I help you find your polling location. And then it's just, you know, reminding your friends and family, because I think that one thing that I've learned when I'm not directly, you know, working on a campaign or doing, you know, electoral work is, I'm not right now, you know, I'm working in government, is that, you know, we all have a lot going on. We have a full calendar. We have other things that we have to take care of, that sometimes, you know, we do need to put, you know, a notification or something in our calendar to make sure that we do go out and do our, you know, do our part in this process.
Yeah, no, it again, that's one of the things that frustrates me the most when political candidates come to talk to us, and all of us have been part of some campaign. It's sort of like they want to do this voter outreach, and it's like, you got to engage people, right? And so this is where the issues comes in, right? What are the issues that move us? And it's always interesting how when the polls talk about the issues, you know, sometimes people think immigration is the most important, but really it's economics. People come here to work, they come here to prosper, all of those things. So Joanna, speak to me what you think are the issues that have best motivated your circle of folks to get them engaged. And I always tell people, look, a lot of us do a whole lot of work, but it really is around our inner circle and the people that we can influence, right? in terms of participation. What are the issues? Because I think they get us so wrong as Latinos, and part of it is our diversity, where we're coming from, what our personal experiences. But what are the issues that motivate, that you feel have worked for you in terms of motivating people to come out and participating?
So I'm glad you said that, again, we're not a monolith, because I think that's a whole topic in itself. So I won't go into that, but I'm glad that you are saying that. I think for me, I think it depends on, so for example, for local elections and stuff, I think it's quality of life issues that get people out. And it's been like that for a very long time. I think, what impacts me and my family immediately is really what's going to get folks out. And I think sometimes people don't understand the difference between that and state, but because there seem to be more quality of life issues, more of the macro issues are, I say macro, but like the federal stuff, I think has a lot to do with the economy being number one. And I think, again, because people are impacted by their taxes or what they qualify for, they don't qualify for, all of those type of things that I think are impact, again, people on the ground. And I think for me in my circle, definitely immigration is something that we that definitely pulls at the heart for many individuals, and education, access to education, I think, is the others. Again, I think sometimes folks are confused in terms of, what exactly, but overarching, I think education impacts many, many people, because around our circles, not necessarily access to like higher education, but more of the local stuff. So I think those are conversations that oftentimes, again, they fall into those buckets, economy being a big one, quality of life, and education.
So Joanna and I are probably from the same generation, although I'm older than Joanna. So the B girls over here, Vanessa and Valentina, young people, this millennial, I'm gonna mess up that name every time I possibly can, just to prove a point that I don't like all those labels. But anyway, what is it that you believe motivates people the most? Like, given your experience, is, in terms of issues in particular, when you talk to folks, and obviously even Valentina, you're going after a certain constituency that's marginalized, what resonates with them? And then for you, Vanessa, what resonates? You did the Philly counts. It was hard getting people, to participate in the census. It's like, what were those key words that you felt really resonated with folks and got people motivated? We'll start with you, Valentina.
Okay. That was a loaded question. So,
you do it every day.
Yeah,
you
I
knock
know,
on someone's door. And
so,
you're like,
like crazy enough, us Z's and millennials are talking about the same thing, right? We're talking about education. We're the generation that graduated recently, not too recent, right? So within like the last 5 to 6 years, we've graduated, right? So we talk about education. We do talk about quality of life as well when we're having these conversations, right? We talk about how interesting it is how these areas that are being gentrified are so focused on street cleaning, right? On making sure that they're not over policed, because these places like Fishtown and Northern Liberties, only because those are close to my neighborhood, I'll say that, Fishtown and Northern Liberties aren't being over policed. But when you get to like my side of the tracks, literally my side of the tracks, we're being way over policed. So we're talking about over policing, quality of life, education, childcare, affordable childcare, because once you meet this, what is it called, middle class status, childcare is unaffordable at that point. You don't qualify for assistance, but you don't make enough money. So we're talking about equitable, equitable economics, right? Yeah, so those are kind of like the things that we talked about as well.
So that's what helps you pull people out. Vanessa, you've done a lot of door knocking. You have a lot of folks on the ground. What did you hear during the census? You did a census during the COVID. people weren't opening the doors. Like, what motivated folks to open the door for you and your team?
Yeah, I think that I always lean on, being transparent, being, myself, sharing my story, sharing why I particularly, why I filled out the census at that time in 2020. And I think that, when you share information about, at that moment, what was at stake, in making sure that everyone was counted, that we were well represented in that 2020 count, and the resources that were going to come to our communities. And when you talk about like messaging, one of the things that actually was a good messaging strategy for that was we would tell people, that pothole in your street, we want to make sure that we're fully funded for roads, for the next 10 years to come. It's not just for 1 year, it's for the next 10 years. So, really doing that. Another really cool thing that we did at Philly Counts, and for all of you that don't know, Joanna was actually the leader of one of her offices that she led, and also Stephanie Reed. And we created a census champion training. So at that moment, we had that training in 7 languages. It was an hour and 30 minutes, and we would just essentially, it was like a trusted messenger training, where people learned all about the census, and we were able to walk through common frequently asked questions about the census, so that people then could go out to their community and talk about it, be able to talk about it with confidence. So those are some of the things that we did in building community. And I think that one thing that we saw that during the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, actually like probably a few days before the city was shut down, that's when people were able to fill out the census. So it was bad timing, unfortunately. And one thing that we saw is that we can't just be talking to people about the census. We have to check in with people about how they're doing, connect them to COVID resources that were available at that time, and just other resources, because we saw that, once we're able to, build that trust, whether it was on the doors, on the phones, talking to someone on the street, people felt valued, and they felt that, we cared about them. So we're not only here to get you to fill out the census, we're here because, we care about our community. And, that was the last thing that we would talk to people about, which I thought was very effective.
So very quickly, ladies, and then I want to go through some lightning round questions. COVID, technology. My mother had an iPhone 5 till the other day. And when I told her the 5G meant she had to upgrade, she was, not happy about that. So in this new COVID reality that we live, how did our community respond to that? Because I think, everybody now likes the efficiency of Zoom calls, of webinars, of all of this other stuff. What does that mean for our community? Do we get left behind for our seniors and others, not access to internet? Like, what are you guys experiencing, Joanna?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think, let me just say something about the census, how my team set me up. We had to do door knocking, right? And I think people were happy to see us outside sometimes. So we had to walk, talk from far and all that and do signs and everything. But I think sometimes people did welcome us because they just saw a different person. But
they wanted to talk to somebody.
So it was advantageous sometimes. But how did they give me borough home? You know how many steps those houses have? How is it that I got stuck with that area? But anyway, that's an aside. It's okay. I got my cardio done.
You're talking to a candidate who had to run in the far Northeast. I know those steps in Feltonville and Juniata. Yes. And you can't cross over people's yards and lawns. You can't do that. Yeah, you got to.
But anyway, that's an aside. I just had to share that. But I think, unfortunately, there is a huge technology divide. And, while there were definitely resources, we were part of that, distribution of different types of resources for technology to get the kids, and I know definitely you were at the helm of some of those approvals with the school district giving out those tablets and all that, but they were all restricted. I think people thought that they were like unlimited. No era así. But, for us, specifically, even talking about in my current job, what we saw was that, people didn't always access it via phone. So, having that walkability to have a walk-in, was really important for us to make sure that we weren't leaving people behind. So while it definitely benefited many people and it was advantageous because they don't have to go to, in person or, transportation and some of the other barriers that sometimes we confront, we realized that, having a chat line was not the only way of doing things and could not remain. So those, whether it was hotline or whether it was phone, which is why when we were at city, I was at the city with city count, with Philly counts for any election work that we did, or whether it was COVID, we always had to make sure that phone was still accessible. I know it was old fashioned type of way, but that was so critical to make sure that we can get those assessments that Vanessa was talking about, those quality of life assessment. What are the needs? What are the barriers? So again, I don't think that we're at a place right now where it's like, one size fits all. Unfortunately, there's still a true reality of, technology divide.
For voting, this is such a big issue. We have the lowest participation rate of Latinos on mail-in voting, right? And when the Governor Wolf announced mail-in voting, everybody was like, oh, great, great. And when you looked at the number of people that were soliciting mail-in voting in our community, it is dismal. So Valentina and Vanessa, Millennial World, can you tell me, what are we missing? That you would think that would be the space where all of you would come up and say, okay, this is what we want to do. How do we, we have a digital divide. We're not participating in the electronic and the mail-in voting. What do we do to up those numbers? Because we are the lowest participants in mail-in voting.
So, one, when it comes to mail, I am a perpetrator at this too. If it is not a bill, I literally toss to the side. The only thing I open are usually bills. I'm like, it's a bill, let me pay it. It's a bill, let me pay it. And everything else gets tossed to the side. And I think the reality is in the day of living we're in right now, right? Especially with my generation, we're focused on where we're receiving our income, not too much on like, oh, it's time to vote, or this voter registration coming, or oh, this is a mail-in ballot, right? That's not the focus. So relatability is kind of the key. It's more like, how do we become relatable to people who honestly don't have the same privileges that we have? Because everybody on this call has some type of like privilege, right? Especially when we're talking about finances. There's people out there who are literally living not paycheck to paycheck, but day to day, are finding $20 here or $40 there, right? Those are the people that we need to reach, that are far and in between. Not far and in between, but yes, far and in between. There's plenty of them, right? Those are the people we need to reach and become relatable to. And as it pertains to Zoom and like all these new ways that we're doing stuff, right? Electronically, in the mail. Humans are made. We are trying to find the correct word, but we're made to interact with other humans. A piece of paper, a computer interface, right? This isn't enough sometimes for people. You become fatigued. You feel alone. Like there's just so many barriers with that.
There is a lot of challenges. I always tell folks, because people will always come to me like, I have this playbook about why Latinos get involved and not get involved. And I'm like, you act like people aren't making like real hardcore decisions every day, around where's the next meal coming from? Who's taking the kids to school? Are we going to be able to afford the trans pass this week? All of those other things. So Vanessa, we're not participating in mail-in voting. We're not registering or participating in mail-in voting in comparison to other populations. What did you learn while you were out there, and what are the things that you would suggest, right, as we move forward?
Yeah. So after the census, our office did get pivoted to running the 17 satellite election offices during the 2020 general election. And I was fortunate enough to run the site at Feltonville, where I saw you, Councilwoman. I think you were checking in for your mom.
Yes, I was.
Yes.
You couldn't carry anybody's ballot. It was really complicated.
No,
it was
not
like,
at all.
no.
Yeah, so I think that when I think of, the technology divide and all of that, I think of, access, to the community for that resource. So I know, Feltonville, as you all know, has a large Latino population. And I think that, I just saw a lot of Latinos coming in, wanting information, wanting to know about the process. They knew it was a site, they were looking for, the translator to help them through the process of either, requesting a mail-in ballot, to, replacing a lost one, and then being able to drop it off in a safe ballot box. And I think that even though like I was tasked to manage the entire site, I probably spent half of my time translating for folks who spoke Spanish and needed help to get through the process. So that was, really, like, I was very proud to be part of that, because I was able to help, individuals have their voice heard through, voting by mail-in ballot. And I think that, language access and then just general access that's nearby is important. So ideally in the future, I would love to see that, especially because we didn't just have one day, we had like an entire month before election day, right? Because people work, people have, other things.
Lives, they have lives. I keep telling people.
Yeah.
So real quickly, ladies, I want to go to some real quick questions, yes or no answers really quick. And then I want to obviously turn it over to some potential questions from the chat room, and I'll let Jovita tell me what we have. Do you feel like the system engages Latino voters enough? Yes, no. Joanna?
No.
Valentina?
No.
Vanessa?
No.
What would you do differently? One thing that you would do different that's like a low-hanging fruit, se cae de la mata. Hello, what would you do differently, Joanna?
One thing. Oh, Lord.
Valentina?
I think
It's
for me,
hard.
it's just,
Go ahead, Vanessa.
I was just going to say, just acknowledge that Latinos have difference in experiences, and then listen to what our needs are before making assumptions.
Okay, so real quickly, we have an election May 17th. So two of the most important races, U.S. Senate races, gubernatorial races that are going on. Do you feel these campaigns have engaged Latino voters enough? Joanna?
I don't think so. I think that there needs to be a presence, a more of a strong presence, not just radio, not just television, but truly be more of a presence in terms of having dialogue. Again, taking it back to basics of, having community forums. And I know things have changed with, COVID, but they need to be able to adapt accordingly.
We're touchy-feely people. I tell people all the time. I know during COVID, my husband would say, you can't go hugging people anymore, Maria. I was like, I don't know if I can live with this new COVID. Valentina, what would you say, are these campaigns for Senate and gubernatorial, have you been spoken to? Do you feel like you're engaged in that?
No. Not
Vanessa?
Yeah, I also feel that more could be done.
So what with that more? I mean, going back, and I know it's always a hard question. It's like, what else? What's like the low-hanging fruit that they could be doing?
If I can
go
answer.
ahead, Valentina. Go ahead.
It's kind of like an extension of Vanessa said, right? Understanding that we have different experience, and also understanding that Latinos, no matter what. No matter where you're from, right? Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, no matter where you're from, it's a cultural thing. The most low-hanging fruit is the fact that everything we do is based on our culture. Everything that we put our heart and are loving to is based in our culture. And we see these especially in Philadelphia, right? In these neighborhoods that different cultures are in, right? So you see taller puertorriqueños, vamos juntos. You see it in the art that is painted on every wall, right? Incorporate who we are into these things, and we'll come flocking and flooding like we always do.
Messaging is hugely important. Vanessa, you want to add to that? What else do you think they could be doing to encourage us to participate?
Yeah, I think just like investing more in our community. I think that we see that, usually candidates come around when there's a campaign, et cetera, like they should be, involved throughout the year. I believe like all initiatives should, keep people involved in some way or another. That way it doesn't seem like when elections coming, we want something from you. It should be something that comes naturally from the voter.
I would
add, Councilwoman, that, investing, also just hiring from community, because, they all have representatives, to really support them. But if they hire within community, it goes a long way as well.
I totally agree. I don't want to leave this forum without just reminding us that the one place where Latinas are part of the 1% is as it relates to Latinas getting elected. We are 1% of the women and men elected across the country. So, I never thought I would be part of the 1%. That's not the 1% group I want to be part of. So I just want to put that on the record that we are 1% of the elected representation in this country. So it is shameful, but Latinas have the potential, right? If we're engaged, we talked about it a little bit, we have to engage folks. The issues have to speak to us. They have to be relevant to our personal life experiences, how you got here. Joanna mentioned whether you migrated, immigrated, those life experiences really speak to that. I'm in DC today and tomorrow lobbying on the issue of Puerto Rico. We have an 80% turnout rate in Puerto Rico because it is about all the things Valentina mentioned, how politicians engage through music, through culture, through the things that move us, through our shared values. There's a higher participation rate. So this is not like we're coming from countries where we're not engaged. We are coming to a country that still has not learned how to engage us, right? And that's part of the conversation that we're trying to have this evening. And I will say that, I think Amy mentioned Eusebio, our Office of Immigration Director. She says I miss the days of community forums in our neighborhood where elected officials really tried to get our vote. We've been ignored, especially across Pennsylvania. I'm one that truly believes that there is nothing better than those community forums. And I can tell you, whether I'm getting cursed out in Kensington or applauded somewhere else, an angry constituent is a constituent that cares, and you can turn that anger to action, to positive action. So I totally agree with you on all of that. Well, so thank you ladies very much. One parting real quick, one parting phrase. If there was something you can do tomorrow, like this is what I would do, or what I would say, or what has been missing from the conversation, because I think there's a lot of topics that have been missing. What would it be for us to motivate people for May 17th? What is going to happen May 17th that's going to impact women for this election? Why are you coming out to vote May 17th, Joanna?
There's a lot of women rights issues on the table. And for me, that's really important. Valentina, what's on the ballot on May 17th?
So a bunch of women rights and anti-trans bills that are going on right now. That's what I would say.
Hugely important. Vanessa, what's on the ballot on May 17th?
Yeah, so for me, I definitely echo Joanna, Valentina, definitely women's rights, trans rights. And I think that, we're choosing who we're going to choose for like a governor for each of the parties. So that's very important because that's going to take us to November.
Totally agree. So Jovita, do we have some additional questions? I try to pay attention to the.
Thank you.
But I want to welcome you into this conversation and really thank our Black sisters for embracing and supporting and sponsoring this Latina conversation about how we become part of it. You know, we all aspire to be the powerful Black women in this country who have really paved the way for the Democratic Party. So,
and you know, this conversation is very, very heartfelt for me in terms of civic engagement. Like Valentina, I became involved as a 14-year-old. And for me, because I'm older than all of you here, for me, the issue was Roe v. Wade. It was the war in Vietnam. It was civil rights. I worked on my first campaign when I was 14 years old, and I was not even old enough to vote, but I was campaigning for the anti-war candidate. And I was among the first of the 18-year-olds that got the right to vote in 1972.
there you go. There you go.
And in that primary, I was not old enough to vote for Shirley Chisholm.
Oh, wow. But you were part of the movement. You were part of the movement. So
you got it. You got it.
So you got other people to vote for you, which is an important part. I think Vanessa will support this. You know, sometimes we got to vote for those who can't vote, right? And those elections become even more meaningful because we got to get people out to vote for those people whose voices still cannot be heard in this process.
Exactly. And I think that the work that Valentina is doing is very important, because when we become 18-year-olds and we cast our first vote, in many ways that determines how we will vote for the rest of our lives. I have never missed an election day since 1972, whether it was a primary or a general election, because voting was in 1972, voting was very important to me as an 18-year-old. And if messaging can be around young people being that dedicated in terms of voting, it can go a long way. But so now I said my little yakety yak, and I want to go to the chat. And most of the stuff in the chat is really around how wonderful all of you have been. They're from Eugenia Fitzhugh. Congratulations, ladies. Thank you for your dedication and awesome work. From my boss, Ramana Lee Akiyama, what a powerful lineup of speakers. I put in the chat that it seems to go across racial, ethnic, gender lines. The thing that people are most interested in and are those bread and butter issues, the economy, jobs, public safety. And I think those are the things that we're all concerned about. From another, this is a great panel.
I'm gonna translate the Spanish one that's up here.
I was getting ready to say. I was getting to that. So please do go for it.
Because we know Ariana Bracho and she is wonderful. They just held a wonderful forum. She said she just wants to say send her congratulatory to the group and how important it is. And obviously she wants to invite some of us to participate in a conversation about political participation and how women play such a pivotal role in exercising of the vote, because we vote for families. And that's why when you elect a woman, you elect a more comprehensive person, because they're thinking about families, they're thinking about all these things around labor rights and sensitizing the importance of the vote. So there you go. I translated that for you.
Okay, and so this was one of my questions while folks were talking about technology and what it takes to get people. There is what candidates are doing, and people are exploring messaging via text messaging. What do any of you think about that as a way of reaching voters?
It's a place we have to grow into. I'm trying to definitely get my mother into it. The day my mother relies on text messaging for pivotal information, then I will tell you it is working, because she is a super voter, right? So it's always about how she responds to her new iPhone and text messaging that I will tell you there's a future in it.
And in terms of transparency, for me, and I'm a boomer, for me, I hated that candidates text message me. I think it's too much. I do not want to be text messaged by candidates. I don't want to be text messaged by candidates that I've given money to. Wait a minute, Maria, I'm like your mother. I don't want to be text messaged, but I wanted to know how cross-generationally and how all of you feel about messaging via text messaging.
The millennials over here. Joanna, you answer first, because these millennials have a
You're a zillennial.
I actually do like the texting, and I'm more likely to give because it's tied to everything there. I don't have to go in my wallet or anything. So it is just out of convenience. I actually appreciate it. So that's where I'm at.
Good. Valentina?
Technology is so advanced. So now your messages can be filtered. And a lot of people my age filter our messages, so it won't be beneficial. Because if something comes from an unknown sender, it goes to my unknown sender file. And the only thing I ever have open is really my known senders. So.
Ay, Dios mío, Vanessa, save me. Save us from ourselves here.
So I definitely have not tried that feature, but I should check it out. For me, I think that it's helpful when it's just like general voter information. Like when I moved recently, I remember getting a text and being like, I have to update my voter registration, file. So that was important. And I think that text messaging is probably here to stay, and we should definitely embrace it, but it's only one of probably the 10 things you can do to engage voters.
Thank you. I also see a message here from Amy Eusebio, who is the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And she says, yes, I miss the days of community forums in our neighborhood and elected officials really trying to get our vote. We've been ignored, especially across.
We've been talking about that because we're Huggy Philly people. I just want to shout out because I saw Pearl put up something in the chat room, and she said, "Dear Maria and panelists, thank you for sharing your community voting experience as a model for the Asian community to learn. The Chinese community is still in our baby step in voting." Pearl is like a human cyclone up in the Northeast. Pearl, you probably registered more people between her Muni ID work. I'm sure Amy knows her well, and thank you so very, very much. So we're going to learn from Black women how Latina women are going to become more powerful and empowering our community than Asian women. And if we do this among the women, man, y'all better look out.
We got it covered.
Space for you. So yes, thank you, Pearl. And we look forward to supporting you up there. Jovita, we're almost out of time and we haven't had
so I have one more great and powerful conversation, ladies. Keep up this important work. And now Vanessa, close us out.
I was just so enjoying the conversation. I forgot I was supposed to close us out. So this is the thing. I jotted down some thoughts. Number one, we may be of different cultures, but we can all agree on the importance of voting because of the way it impacts our daily quality of life. And as I hear you talk about the different issues, we share the same concerns and issues also. And then the other thing, as you were talking about not being engaged in the voting process. That's on purpose, y'all. That's on purpose. They do not want people of color to vote because voting is power. We get to determine who's going to run the country. And so it's powerful. And so they want to keep it the way it is. I'm going to say it, old white men. Okay. All right. And so I want to say thank you so much to our amazing Latina sisters who have shed light on the Latino vote. I want to thank our amazing panelists, Joanna Otero-Cruz, Valentina, Rosario, and Vanessa Carraccosa. I hope I pronounced your name right. And a special, special, special shout out and thank you to our council member, warrior queen, Maria Kiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Vanessa, so much. You ladies have been so much fun. Thank you all. Everybody go have a drink.
Thank you for having us. Good evening.
Good
Thank
evening.
you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night.